Hi everyone, this is Chris Green, the History Chap, and I just want to tell you what happened in British history, week commencing the 6th of September. Well, let's start on the 6th of September, 1651. Charles II hides up an oak tree. Why on earth was he doing that? Well, you've probably heard of some pubs called the Royal Oak. Well, this is the original Royal Oak. It's the oak tree that Charles II hid in after the Battle of Worcester. 2 years previously, his dad, Charles I, had been executed during the English Civil War. The Royalists now put all their hope in his son, also called Charles. They called him Charles II. And Charles II brought an army from Scotland, came down into England, met Oliver Cromwell at Worcester, and was decisively trounced by the experienced Oliver Cromwell. Charles was now on the run. He was being hunted by parliamentary soldiers, and he arrived at Boscobel House, which is, if I can just go, it's actually just through those trees there. I don't know if you can see it. There's a little white bit. Yeah, that's the Boscobel House. And he arrived on the 6th of September, 1651, and the parliamentary troops were right behind him. So he had to take refuge. He hid while they were searching the grounds. He hid in this tree. This is the very tree he hid in. He stayed there all day. Finally, the parliamentary soldiers cleared off, and he escaped. Eventually escaped. He went to a nearby house, Old Moseley Hall. He then went to Bristol, Brighton, Shoreham and in Sussex, and finally got a ship from Shoreham in Sussex to safety in France, where he remained in exile for the next 9 years. When Oliver Cromwell died in 1660, or just before that, but when Cromwell died, the Parliament didn't know what to do. His son wasn't up for the job, and so they went across to Netherlands by then, where Charles was, and offered him the throne. And Charles II came back, and that was the beginning of a period in England called the Restoration. The escape and the hiding in the oak tree is commemorated in a pub name that you find all over England, the Royal Oak. In fact, there are over 400 pubs called the Royal Oak, and it's the second most popular pub name in England. Number one spot is held by the Red Lion. There you go. 6th of September, 1651, the Royal Oak, the original one. And Boscobel House, where he hid, and the famous oak tree that's in the grounds, is run by the English Heritage, and it's actually open to the public. So pop along there if you're in the West Midlands. 7th of September 1940, the London Blitz begins. Having failed to wipe out the RAF during the Battle of Britain, Hitler ordered the Luftwaffe to turn their attention to Britain's cities. And at 4 p.m. on the 7th of September, 348 German bombers commenced an aerial attack on London. They came up the River Thames, brilliant landmark to follow, isn't it? And they dropped 337 tons of explosives onto the East End docks and the surrounding suburban areas. And that evening, guided by the fires of the burning buildings, a second wave of 250 bombers came in and descended on the capital. On that first day of the London Blitz, 448 Londoners were killed and over 1,000 were injured. Just 3 days later, in this week, on the 10th of September 1940, hundreds of EastEnders, many of them now homeless, were sheltering in the basement of South Holsville School in Canning Town when it received a direct hit from a parachute bomb. The school collapsed into the basement. Official records at the time claimed that there were 77 people had died. But records from the National Archives released in the last 10-15 years suggest that the figure was actually closer to 600, which would make it by far the worst civilian loss in Britain during World War II. The Blitz on London, and then it transferred to other major British cities, lasted until May 1941, and in that period something like 43,000 civilians were killed. Over half of them in London. And finally, on the 12th of September 1895, Percy Pilcher makes the first controlled glider flight in Britain. Percy Pilcher is one of those forgotten pioneers of world aviation history. Born in Bath in 1867, after a short career in the Royal Navy, he ended up as an apprentice engineer in a Glasgow shipyard. And it was there that he developed an interest in flight. And in 1895, as I say, on this date, he made the first controlled glider flight in Britain in a hang glider which he called the Bat. A year later, he set a world record for a heavier than air flight in a hang glider, which was called the Hawk. and he travelled a whole 800 feet, and that was a world record at the time. So he now set his sights on the next logical goal, a mechanised flight. By 1899 he built a triplane with a 4 horsepower engine, and because he was hard up for cash by now, he invited potential sponsors to watch a test flight at Stamford Hall in not Lincolnshire, in Leicestershire, beg your pardon. Unfortunately, just before, a couple of days before the big event, the crankshaft on the engine broke. But all these sponsors and well-wishers were coming, so rather than disappoint him, he decided he'd do a quick sort of flyby flying display in his record-breaking Hawk hang glider. So on a rainy day in Leicestershire, he took off. And unfortunately, the rain had sort of contracted the canvas wings. So they were pulling, and they caused the bamboo frame on the tail to snap when he was about 40 feet in the air. And Pilcher plummeted to the earth, and he died 2 days later without ever regaining consciousness, aged 32. 9 years later, the Wright brothers achieved Pilcher's dream of making the world's first mechanised flight at Dayton, Ohio, and Percy Pilcher's legacy, well, faded from view. But not totally. You can find a monument where he crashed at Stamford Hall in Leicestershire. And Percy Pilcher's hang glider, the Hawk, the one which he set the record with and which he was using when he died, is now on display at the National Museum of Scotland in Edinburgh. And here's a really interesting little bit. In 2003, Cranfield University, the School of Aeronautics, made a replica of Percy's 1899 plane, the one that never flew, and they flew it for a whole 1 minute 25 seconds. Which is 26 seconds longer than the Wright brothers achieved with their plane, the Kitty Hawk. So that's another what if from history, isn't it? Amazing. So Percy Pilcher, who on this day, 12th of September 1895, flew the first controlled glider flight in British history. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, then sign up for more of these talks, my weekly talks at thehistorychap.com. Look forward to seeing you soon. And in the meantime, take care.